Hello, I am known as the New Age Movie Rebel, and I'm here today to talk about one of my favorite movies, The Cable Guy. Alright, now, The Cable Guy is actually a movie that I have watched many times. It's played by Jim Carrey and Matthew Broderick, two main characters of the story. Now, in the movie, um, there is Matthew Broderick. He starts out as the main character. He has just moved into an apartment because his quote unquote ex fiancee has just kicked him out of his home because she decided not to go through with the idea of marrying him. And as a result, not only did she kick him out, but they went on a semi permanent relationship break. Okay. Now, this is where it gets complicated. See, he's hooking up the cable. That's how it starts. It shows infomercials from cable back in the 1990s. And then it gets weird because it turns out the cable guy comes in and it's Jim Carrey. Who else? And as it turns out, Matthew Broderick was in the shower when Jim Carrey started knocking on his door. So he walks in, and it's just immediately downplayed because the second he walks in and you hear his voice for the first time from behind that door, you instantly know, is this going to be a scary movie or a batshit insane movie, like most Jim Carrey movies? And then Jim Carrey gets into the living room, and he starts doing that kind of sexual thing, like he starts rubbing on the wall trying to find the cable hookup wire that's not actually plugged, that doesn't have a plug. So he starts rubbing the walls in a very sensual manner. Anyway, he goes through, he finds the hole, and he's talking back and forth with Matthew Broderick. So Matthew Broderick eventually, Matthew Broderick goes back to change and everything else. Jim Carrey comes back, and Jim Carrey has just rearranged all of his furniture because apparently it does something with the reception to help it make it better. I don't know. Next thing you know, Matthew Broderick steps back in, and he's ready to walk Jim Carrey out, and Jim Carrey walks him out, but then Jim Carrey turns around before he leaves and said, "Hey, would you like to go up to the satellites to show, show how all this thing works? Take him up to the satellite dish outpost out in the middle of the forest." Of course, Matthew Broderick tries to come up with some sort of excuse as to why he can't do it. But Jim Carrey, fixes him and obviously gets him to go. And so Matthew Broderick and Jim Carrey hanging out, and turns out Jim Carrey's real name in the movie is known as Chip Douglas. Okay, so next thing you know, Jim Carrey, Chip Douglas, gives him Matthew Broderick some advice on what to say to his girlfriend Robin when he sees her next, and to try to give him a little bit more of an idea how to try to win her back. So he does, and he says, tries to get her to think, well, maybe if I play this confidence card, it'll work. So he does that, and he tells her that he's watching HBO the following day, and says she can come over, they can get together, watch it for themselves, and so they do. Robin comes over that following day. Oh wait, sorry, skip the scene. There's a scene straight after that where Matthew Broderick is at the gym around with some of his co-workers from work. Jim Carrey shows up as if he's like basically stalking Broderick at this time, and shows up and is in the most hilarious like workout outfit ever. He's wearing like 80s tight runner shorts, blue tank top matching the shorts. The shorts go up above his knee. It's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, so Jim Carrey goes through and obviously does not really know how to play basketball, and it's really fun because that's what they're doing. They're playing basketball, and they decide they're going to do teams, and that's what happens. Jim Carrey gets involved in it. And there's a bunch of funny, like, crazy, over-the-top scenes where, like, Jim Carrey is groping people in the middle of the field, the court, it's just nuts. Anyway, so after that, Jim Carrey ends up winning the game, but at the cost of kind of, being a dick And as a result, Matthew Broderick says, he doesn't care, he doesn't want to hang out with him, he doesn't really like him. Jim Carrey, afterwards, after Matthew Broderick gets home, finds out that has called him over 10 times and left 10 messages on his machine. Then, next thing you know, Robin shows up at his door, and they're watching the TV and all that stuff. He turns it on. Next thing you know, the cable's out. And so he's like, oh, I got an idea. I'll call my cable guy. He calls him up, but then next thing you know, right as he's on the ringing part of the phone, bang, bang, Jim Carrey comes knocking on his door, and he's like, what the hell? And Matthew Broderick goes, answers the door. It's Jim Carrey. He's got like this really deep, sensitive, but also really creepy and dark tone on his voice, and he's getting kind of scary. So Jim Carrey, he does all this stuff, and finally he gets his cable going and leaves. But after Matthew Broderick promises to go out with him the following day to a restaurant. That restaurant scene, that's funny shit. Turns out they go to a medieval times restaurant in California. And medieval times, and they're doing the whole reenactment scene, which is what they do in medieval times. They do the whole pretend, medieval times jousting and imitations and stuff like that. It's kind of reenact stuff. It's pretty cool. And Jim Carrey apparently gets cable for all the guys who work there, and so as a result, he gets to tell the people there that he wants to fight Matthew Broderick as one of the knights, and they fight each other. All while this is happening, Matthew Broderick is probably thinking in his head, what the hell am I doing here? And so Matthew Broderick and Jim Carrey start to fight in the middle of the arena dressed like knights. All that while, towards the end of it, Jim Carrey is coming up, and he's saying, oh, it's like the time when Kirk had to fight Spock on Star Trek. And he starts doing the theme to the Kirk and Spock fight on Star Trek. The da 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 da. Yeah, that. And he's singing that, and he's kicking Matthew Broderick's ass. And then they do a jousting scene on the horses. That was pretty fun. And then so leading so on and so forth. Eventually it leads up to them going back to Matthew Broderick's place. And Matthew Broderick finds out that Jim Carrey had broke into his house and given him all these great audio TVs and speakers and stuff, and a karaoke machine. That leads to one of my favorite scenes where Jim Carrey and Matthew Broderick have a karaoke party at Matthew Broderick's apartment. And Jim Carrey sings the song, oh my god, he sings Jefferson Airplanes, Want Somebody to Love, in the weirdest freaking way possible. Okay? So eventually, Jim Carrey gets Matthew Broderick to sleep with a woman that he told him was one of his friends, but it turns out it was just really a prostitute that he bought for him. And after Matthew Broderick wakes up in the morning and finds that out, he throws Jim Carrey out and says he never wants to see him again. Turns out that Robin, all in this process, Robin, Matthew Broderick's ex-girlfriend, ex-fiancée, is going through and dating someone else. Meaning going on a date with someone else. And it turns out it's Owen Wilson. Little cameo inside with Owen Wilson. And here comes Jim Carrey strolling in saying, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make this better. I'm going to try to stop Robin from dating this guy. Which he does. But in the highest fashion. In the best fucking thing I've ever seen. Jim Carrey sneaks into the men's bathroom at this restaurant where Robin and him are going. And Owen Wilson, he gets I don't know what they call it, but the service guys in the bathroom that hand you paper towels and stuff like that, you're supposed to tip them. Yeah. He dresses up like one of those guys and tricks Owen Wilson into thinking he's one. Okay? That's fucked up. Anyway, then leads to the fighting scene between Jim Carrey and Owen Wilson. I'm not kidding. That actually happened. And Owen Wilson gets his ass handed to him by Jim fucking Carrey. And gets his head shoved in the fucking toilet. I tell you right now, I always wanted to do that. I fucking hate a lot of Owen Wilson's movies. He's a terrible actor. So yeah. So later on, Jim Carrey's going through, and after beating up Owen Wilson in the bathroom, Jim Carrey goes back and sees. He gives Robin free cable, and all in the process, acting out as if since him and Matthew Broderick are like great friends, and tries to get on her good side to try to get her to see that Matthew Broderick deserves to have a second chance as being her boyfriend. And so after that, Jim Carrey then also sets Matthew Broderick up. All during this, after finding out that Matthew Broderick doesn't really want to be his friend, Jim Carrey sets him up by saying to the police that Matthew Broderick had accepted all the gifts he'd given him and that they were really stolen property. And they send Matthew Broderick to jail for the weekend. And so Matthew Broderick's in jail because of Jim Carrey. He also loses his job after that. And so Jim Carrey, he's in jail, and he goes to have a meeting in jail with his lawyer for a visitation thing. And turns out it's Jim Carrey just wanting to see him. And he's like, I could be your best friend or your worst enemy. And then he's like, he gives him the option, he says, come on. He puts his hand up on the glass and says, come on, touch it. And he's like, he gives him the option to either touch it, or, have what he was going to do. And he chooses what he's going to do. Jim Carrey then puts the phone down and reenacts a scene from apparently Midnight Express or something. And he takes his shirt off and presses his nipple up against the glass right next to another prison inmate, and tries to get them to believe that Matthew Broderick's gay, so that way they'll like rape him or something. It's pretty funny. And Matthew Broderick's overacting. He's like, Jesus Christ, you're gonna get me killed, oh God. And Jim Carrey's just like, I'm just messing with you. Then Jim Carrey leaves. And turns out that Jim Carrey went after Robin and Matthew Broderick's parents. And they have a dinner party together where they play a game called Porno Password. Apparently, it's like I don't know what the hell it is. It's basically you have a password, and you're supposed to guess what the password is with your partner. It's very sexual and very fucked up. Anyway, so it leads up to apparently Matthew Broderick gets fired, and Jim Carrey gets really pissed that Matthew Broderick still doesn't want to be his friend. And so what does he do? Jim Carrey kidnaps Robin, Matthew Broderick's girlfriend, Matthew Broderick's girlfriend, and takes them to the satellite dishes. And then after that, Jim Carrey waits for Matthew Broderick to show up to get her. Matthew Broderick shows up, of course, and Jim Carrey and Matthew Broderick end up having this big fight. They literally punch and kick each other and all that stuff. And Jim Carrey then eventually shows, he climbs up to the top of the tower. And apparently, during the whole time, Jim Carrey was having flashbacks of his young childhood. And the reason why he's so crazy is because his mom never gave him any attention, and the whole reason why he never grew up like that was because the only thing he had to grow up with was his TV. That's all he ever knew was TV. So that's what happened. And so Jim Carrey goes practically crazy, and threatens his girlfriend, and eventually Matthew Broderick, while Jim Carrey is distracted, grabs his girlfriend, gets him over. The police show up in a helicopter, and Jim Carrey thinks he's having some kind of revelation, and decides that the only way he's going to redeem himself is to jump off this tower and destroy the satellite dish, so that way everybody in the town will stop watching TV. That's what happens. And turns out he does that. He falls off the tower and destroys the satellite dish, and everything goes on. And then the ending is where Jim Carrey is looking up, and he's smiling at this helicopter driver who's taken away to get medical attention, then hospital. And it turns out Jim Carrey at the end smiles at this guy. It's just saying, "Oh, I'm going to stalk you now, buddy." That's what happens. That's how the movie ends. And I think that's fucking hilarious. I love Jim Carrey. Alright, I love him. He's a great actor. So great. Anyway, I hope you liked this review. Thank you. Goodbye. This has been the New Age Movie Rebel. Signing out.